It always starts the same way in neighborhoods like Oak Hollow Estates. Someone decides they know better than everyone else. Someone decides the rules don't apply, not to them anyway. That someone, in this case, was Vivian Ashworth. Vivian had lived in Oak Hollow for 15 years. To the neighbors, she was polished, organized, and always smiling at community gatherings. But behind the perfectly styled hair and tailored suits, she had a hunger for power. Every decision had to run through her. Every inch of land had to be accounted for, controlled, folded neatly into the homeowners association. And if it wasn't, she would find a way to take it. I'm Daniel Mercer. For years, I tried to keep my distance from the HOA circus. I bought my land specifically because it wasn't inside Oak Hollow. My property sat just on the edge, 50 acres of rolling pasture, a modest ranch house, and one private gravel road that I built with my own money. That road wasn't just gravel and limestone. It was blood, sweat, and $80,000 of hard-earned savings. It was mine. Legally recorded. Paid for, maintained, mine. But power-hungry people never stop at fences or boundary lines. They see what you've built and figure out how to make it theirs. It was a sticky summer evening when I first heard the rumble. At first, I thought it was just another delivery truck groaning along the county highway. But when the vibrations grew heavier, I stepped out onto my porch. Headlights in the distance, the silhouette of construction equipment moving across my land. At first I thought, no, it couldn't be. Nobody would dare. But they had. Down the hill, where my gravel road cut through the pasture, a yellow paver rolled across the surface. Dump trucks lined up like soldiers, spewing asphalt. Men in neon vests spread fresh tar, their boots sinking in black rivers of heat. And standing there with her arms folded, smiling like a queen admiring her empire, was Vivian Ashworth. She hadn't asked. She hadn't called. She hadn't even slipped a letter under my door. My road, my private road, was being paved over without my permission. I stormed down the hill, gravel crunching under my boots, anger hot enough to match the asphalt fumes. "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted. Vivian barely glanced at me. "Good evening, Daniel. We're upgrading the road for the community's benefit. It was long overdue." "The community?" I snapped. "This isn't your road. It's mine. I built it. I paid for it. It's on my deed." Vivian's smirk widened. "And yet everyone uses it. Consider this an investment into shared property values. You'll thank me later." The workers kept moving, ignoring me. One man shrugged apologetically, but he didn't stop. They were on her payroll, not mine. By the next morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Assessment fee, $3,200. Project, community road upgrade. Payment due 14 days. No explanation, no signature, just a bill. Most people would have exploded. Most would have called lawyers, filed complaints, or marched into the HOA office to start a shouting match. But I've learned something in my years of dealing with bullies. You don't beat them by shouting louder. You beat them by thinking smarter. And I had time. Vivian didn't know much about me beyond the fact that I lived on the outskirts and kept to myself. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had friends in places she'd never expect. Before moving out here, I ran a logistics business. Trucks, freight, contracts. And in that world, you make allies. One of those allies was Mike Carter, Big Mike to everyone in the county. He ran the largest towing operation across 3 towns. Police contracts, repossessions, private impounds. If a car broke down or got hauled off, chances are it went through Mike's yard. So I made a call. "Mike," I said, "how fast can you clear a neighborhood street?" There was a pause on the other end, then a chuckle. "Depends how many cars we're talking." "Dozens," I replied. "Every board member of an HOA overnight." The laugh turned into a low whistle. "Now that's a job." "What did they do to you?" "They stole my road." Mike didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "Send me the addresses. We'll make it happen. But revenge isn't sweet unless it's done right." So I waited. Over the next week, I let Vivian strut. She held a community unveiling in front of the freshly paved road, cutting a ribbon as neighbors clapped politely. She bragged about how she had negotiated a great deal with the contractors. She even told people I had finally come around and agreed to fold my property into the HOA. I smiled, I nodded, and I let her believe she'd won. But every empire has cracks. Hers came in the form of a local deputy, Sheriff Cole Bradley. A straight shooter known for playing fair, Cole was the kind of man who didn't like to be lied to. When he passed by one evening and saw Vivian boasting on the paved road, he stopped to ask a simple question. "Do you have the paperwork for this?" Vivian's smile faltered for just a second. "Of course, Sheriff. It's all above board." But she didn't produce anything. She couldn't, because there were no papers. No agreements, no deeds transferring ownership. My land was my land. That single crack was all I needed. The night of the board's monthly meeting, Oak Hollow's clubhouse lot was packed. Mercedes, BMWs, shiny, SUVs, every symbol of suburban pride lined up neatly like dominoes waiting to fall. Inside, Vivian sat at the head of the table, sipping sparkling water, acting like a governor. That's when the tow trucks rolled in. One after another, quiet and efficient. Mike's crew knew the drill. Lights dimmed, hooks fastened, tires lifted. Within minutes, the first SUV disappeared down the road. Then another. And another. By the time the meeting reached its second agenda item, half the lot was empty. By the time Vivian noticed, every single car with a board member's name attached to it was gone. Panic rippled through the room. "Where's my car?" Rick Stanton shouted. "Did someone break in?" Vivian rushed outside, heels clacking on pavement, and froze. The lot was nearly bare. Just scattered oil stains and a few confused residents staring at the silence where their vehicles used to be. And there I was, leaning against my truck at the edge of the lot, arms crossed, calm as ever. "You wanted to use my road without asking," I said. "Now your cars are on mine. At Mike's yard, to be exact. You'll find it about 20 miles down the highway. They're safe for now. But next time you decide to steal from me, remember, I don't shout. I don't argue. I just make things disappear." Vivian's face drained of color. For the first time, she had no words. The HOA board scrambled, phones lit up, voices cracked with outrage. Some threatened lawsuits, others begged for explanations. But it didn't matter. The cars weren't coming back until they went through the proper channels and paid the proper fees. And that was only the beginning. Because while Vivian tried to figure out how to spin her humiliation, Sheriff Bradley was already asking questions. Questions about permits, questions about finances, questions that dug into the very heart of how Oak Hollow's HOA had been run for years. And what he found didn't just put Vivian's little road scheme at risk. It threatened to bring down her entire empire. But that's a story for another night. Because as I stood there, watching panic spread like wildfire through the most arrogant board in the county, I realized something. Revenge isn't just about payback, it's about balance. They wanted to control everything. But sometimes you have to remind people that they can't control you. And trust me, by the time the sun rose the next morning, Oak Hollow's board had learned that lesson the hard way. The board never slept that night. Phones buzzed non-stop. Messages flew across group chats. Voices cracked with desperation as Vivian tried to calm her shaken empire. But nothing she said could undo what happened. Their cars were gone, hauled off like toys snatched from spoiled children. And for the first time, the all-powerful Oak Hollow HOA realized they weren't untouchable. By morning, the clubhouse parking lot looked like a war zone. Board members stood around, coffee in hand, whispering about betrayal. Neighbors who'd once bowed to Vivian now stared at her with suspicion. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Did she authorize the paving? Was it legal? How much did she spend without telling us? And that was the key. Not the cars, not even the road. It was the question of money. When people's wallets are threatened, loyalty evaporates. Sheriff Cole Bradley made his way back to the neighborhood the next day. His cruiser rolled slowly across the gleaming blacktop, the sun bouncing off the still shiny pavement. Vivian stood waiting, arms folded, face tightened with forced confidence. "Morning, Sheriff," she said, her tone stiff. "Morning, Vivian," he replied. "Got the paperwork for that road yet?" Her eyes flickered. "It's in process. The board approved it." Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not what I asked. I need permits, deeds, authorization from the county. Something showing you had the right to pave private property." Vivian hesitated, then waved her hand like it was nothing. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. It's just a road." Cole's voice dropped low. "Lady, I've seen men hauled to court for building a shed without a permit. You think paving $80,000 worth of asphalt on land that isn't yours is just a road. Vivian tried to smile, but it faltered. Neighbors overheard. Whispers grew. She was losing them one by one. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. My part was done, for now. The tow trucks had done their job. Every board member had to cough up hundreds in impound fees just to drive again. And while they fumed at me, deep down they knew the truth. I hadn't touched their cars illegally. They'd parked on my road, without permission, without papers. Mike's contracts made the rest airtight. Still, Vivian wasn't the type to admit defeat. She doubled down. 2 days later, another letter showed up on my porch. Notice of fine, $500 per day. Violation. Unauthorized obstruction of community property. I laughed when I read it. They were fining me, for blocking them from land that wasn't even theirs. It was absurd, but it was also dangerous. Because people like Vivian thrive on intimidation. If you give in once, you give in forever. I didn't. Instead, I called Sheriff Bradley and asked for a meeting. We sat in his office, the blinds half drawn. The hum of an old air conditioner rattling against the wall. "Sheriff," I said, "you've seen what's going on. They stole my road, they paved over it, and now they're fining me for not letting them steal more. What's it going to take to shut this down?" Cole leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Truthfully, more than what I've got. I can write reports, flag violations, maybe send it up the chain. But if you want real accountability, this isn't county business anymore. It's federal. Wire fraud, misuse of funds, extortion. If they build residents for projects they didn't authorize, that's serious." That was the crack widening, and I knew how to push it open. Because I wasn't the only one Vivian had stepped on, I started asking around, quietly, talking to neighbors who'd whispered at barbecues, who'd muttered complaints at the grocery store. It didn't take long before the stories came out. One family had been fined for painting their shutters the wrong shade of blue, even though they'd matched the code exactly. Another had been charged for lawn maintenance on a yard they mowed themselves. A widow at the end of the cul-de-sac claimed she'd paid special assessments for years without ever seeing where the money went. Little injustices, all adding up. I gathered every one of those stories, every invoice, every receipt. By the end of the week, I had a binder 2 inches thick. And when I slid it across Sheriff Bradley's desk, his eyes narrowed. "This," he said, flipping through, "isn't just mismanagement. This looks like fraud." Vivian's empire was crumbling, and she didn't even know it. She still walked around Oak Hollow like a queen, barking orders at landscapers, waving to residents like nothing had changed. But behind closed doors, panic was setting in. Board meetings grew heated. Rick Stanton shouted at her about his impound fees. Others whispered about calling an emergency election. A few even threatened to resign. Vivian tried to tighten her grip, insisting everything was fine. She claimed she had lawyers on standby and contacts in the county office. But when neighbors asked to see financial records, she dodged. When they asked for receipts from the paving company, she stalled. The truth is, she'd overplayed her hand, and it was only a matter of time before someone with real power came knocking. That knock came 1 month later. It wasn't Sheriff Bradley this time. It was a pair of federal agents in dark suits. They showed up at the HOA office, badges out, questions sharp. They wanted records. They wanted contracts. They wanted to know where every dollar of assessment, fees had gone for the last 5 years. And Vivian? She didn't have answers. Word spread through the neighborhood like lightning. The queen of Oak Hollow, the woman who paved my road without asking, was now under investigation. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by the pale, hollow look of someone cornered. Neighbors stopped waving. Some stopped speaking to her entirely. A few even apologized to me, admitting they'd been too afraid to challenge her. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The sound of tow trucks in the night. The panic on her face when she realized her power wasn't absolute. That was enough. Vivian Ashworth had thought she could steal my road. Bury me under asphalt and send me the bill. She thought she could intimidate me with fines and papers and empty threats. But in the end, all she did was expose herself. Because the thing about power is this: it doesn't last when it's built on lies. The federal case dragged on for months. Fraud, extortion, misuse of funds. Some board members turned on her, cutting deals to save themselves. Others vanished quietly, selling their houses and moving away. The HOA was gutted, stripped of authority, forced to rebuild under new leadership. And the road, it stayed. A black strip of asphalt cutting across my land. Still technically mine, still legally recorded, but now every time I drove down it, I smiled. Not because of the pavement, but because of what it represented. It wasn't just a road. It was proof that when you stand your ground, when you refuse to be bullied, when you use patience instead of anger, you win. And as for the cars that vanished that night, let's just say, some lessons are best remembered with a bill from the impound lot. In Oak Hollow Estates, they don't call it Vivian's Road anymore. They call it Daniel's Road, and every time a neighbor drives across it, they remember the summer their queen lost her crown.